Hello and welcome to our podcast. My name is Zenobio, and today I am joined by my friends Sebastian and Brandon. Have you ever thought about loving someone who already is dating someone? How might that make you feel? Then you might find answers for what to do next in the novel, like Water for Chocolate by Laura Esquivel.
In the book, Like Water for Chocolate, takes place in the early 1900s on a ranch in Mexico, close to the Texas border, and follows a family consisting of Mama Elena, the mom, Tita, her daughter, and our main character, Pedro, the lover of Tita, Rosada, the sister, Gertrudis, another sister, and Nancha, a worker in the ranch. This is also while the Mexican Revolution is still happening. In this podcast, we will discuss the perspectives of two characters, Tita and Pedro, about love and how these perspectives relate to their relevance of love and in their era, which is the early 1900s.
Now for transition, we will see how the perspective of Tita when it comes to love and look at some evidence from the book.
To start, in the first few pages of the book, we learn of Tita and her love for Pedro. For some context, both Tita and Pedro are presumed to be 16 at this point, so they are both at the age of maturity and love. Because of this, they fall in love, but when Pedro asks for her hand from Mama Elena, she says no. In the book, it states if he intends to ask for your hand, tell him not to bother. He'll be wasting his time and mine too. You know perfectly well that you being the youngest daughter means you have to take care of me until the day I die. January, page 10.
Tita is denied any right she had, pretty much ruining her relationship with Pedro, just because Tita's tradition doesn't allow the youngest to leave until the last breath of Mama Elena, making it seem as if Tita would be deeply saddened by the fact of being neglected of marriage, trying to show us as the readers that in the book, Tita is our protagonist while Mama Elena serves as an antagonist.
We can also see Tita's perspective when the narrator talks about Tita's emotions when she first falls for Pedro. Let's look at an article from the book to back up our evidence.
As Tita reminisces about Pedro, she thinks back to when she was at a party and spoke with Pedro for the first time, and she fell right in love. From that night on, she would love him forever, and now she had to give up. It wasn't decent to desire your sister's future husband. She has to try to put him out of her mind somehow. January, page 19.
What this evidence shows is her love for him was strong, and even when she tried to forget about him, she couldn't, showing how much love she has for Pedro. What is interesting to realize is that in Mexican culture of the 1910s, marriage at the age of 16 was not weird, but normal, showing love is affected by culture and time, since we know that we tend to marry after 18.
With all of this in mind, we see Tita's perspective of love early on her life. And we see how the cultural aspect of life is in the early 19s and culture have affected the love Tita has. An example of this is her desire to leave the ranch and find her true love. Her only motive for this desire is since she wanted to reveal and felt as if her culture was removing her from what she wanted to have. Now we should see how our other characters feel about love. Now to transition, we will be talking about how Pedro showed his love for Tita, and for more evidence that back up for this next quote.
Pedro, who was also deeply in love, has a conversation with his dad, who proves to us that Pedro was committed and showed some maturity at such a young age. Evidence of this from the book states, "Why did you do that, Pedro? It will look ridiculous. You're agreeing to marry Rosara. What happened to the eternal love you swore to Tita? Aren't you going to keep that vow?" "Of course I'll keep it," says Pedro. "When you're told there's no way you can marry the woman you love and your only hope of being near her is to marry her sister, wouldn't you do the same? So you intend to marry her without love?" His father asks. Pedro replies, "No, Papa. I am going to marry with a great love for Tita that will never die." January, page 15.
What this quote shows is that Pedro was so dedicated to his love, even if he couldn't marry Tita, he decided to marry Rosada, even if he felt nothing for her, to the point where he was fine living his life with someone else to stay closer to his one true lover. And it explains it all to his dad, showing he would do something considered cheating to others just to be with Tita. His true love showing some commitment that is considered extreme. When you remember Rosada is older than Pedro, and Rosada has almost no say if she wanted to get married or not.
After this conversation, we see Pedro show more of his strong feelings for Tita and how strong his love for her, and we will see how Pedro could have been led to love through his culture, even though what has happened between his history.
At his own wedding, Pedro takes the opportunity to declare his love for Tita again. Pedro, holding Tita much closer than convention allowed, took advantage of this unique opportunity to whisper in Tita's ear, "I am sorry I will be, since through this marriage I have gained what I really love, the chance to be near you, the woman I really love."
We can see here that Pedro still loves Tita so much, and one of the main reasons for why he married Rosada was to get closer to Tita and live with the woman he truly loves, more than Rosada. This tells us that Pedro had very strong love for Tita that never weakened even after marrying Rosada, and he was at a point where he was deciding that his heart wanted him to cheat on Rosada for his love for Tita, even if he knew that it was possible that he could only have children with Rosada and have to give his physical body to someone else. So what the quote could mean is that spiritually, Tita is the only person for Pedro. What this shows in general is that throughout in the beginning of the book, the love of Tita and Pedro had was special and was affected due to the culture and the time of the story, leading for the drama of the book and proving that the perspective of Tita and Pedro on love is affected by their culture and how they were raised, or their perspective, making it seem as if the true intent for the romance that is demonstrated is a form of rebellion for what was thought about in the generations before our main characters, since Tita is forced to suppress her love, while Pedro is forced to express his love for another woman just as an act. What this makes me think is that this novel is about the two perspectives on love and the hardship they originally felt of knowing their love couldn't be public, making me think this is actually a culturally different story of Romeo and Juliet. Something we can compare and contrast about the two characters' perspectives on love is something that they both have in common is that they're both suppressed in their love, both of them having to hide their affairs just to be together. But something that we can contrast is how our perspective changes on who has it hard. For example, since the book's main character is Tita, we can see that for her it was a lot harder, but we can assume Pedro was more easy since all he had to do was decide who to marry.
Something that I can compare and contrast to Tita and Pedro is that Tita and Pedro both love each other to where they wish to get married. However, Pedro is more willing to take risks and do things that go out of the line. For example, when he married Rosaura, only to get closer to Tita, the woman he truly loves. And Tita is also willing to do things, but stays more on the comfortable side.
Another comparing and contrasting is that Tita has a hard choice because Tita, one of her choices is like see Pedro get married with Rosario, and her feelings they're gonna like broke down even though Pedro still loves Tita, but like Tita cannot marry Pedro because of her tradition with her family, her ancestors. So Tita, like for no matter what, she needs to take care of her mom. But on the other side, Pedro does not need to do that. Pedro can marry any girl, and like Pedro has a choice, and Tita doesn't. So technically, Tita's feelings doesn't matter over here.
To close out, we'll all each individually share how this book can connect to us. For me, how this connects with me is the fact that the book takes place in my homeland, and I understand the cultural and food and family dynamics that take place in the book. What I have learned from the book is some recipes for cooking and the importance of freedom we have since people like Tita didn't have freedom for a big part of their life.
I learned that no matter what love comes and goes, and over the time, people change the way they think and the way they act and the way they see their stuff and the way they see love.
I have learned that feelings and love in general can change a person's actions and thoughts. This can completely change a person. For example, if a man is really depressed and finds someone who he truly loves, she can fix his depression and change his life forever.
Thank you for listening to our podcast. I hope you have a wonderful day, and thank you for listening.